The audience expected laughter. They came to Family Feud for the jokes, the buzzer sounds, the playful banter. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, Steve Harvey gave them something they didn't expect, a lesson. And when he stopped mid-show, lowered his microphone, and turned to face the entire studio with an expression no one had seen before, the room didn't just go quiet. It went silent in a way that made people hold their breath. What happened in the next 7 minutes would become one of the most powerful moments in game show history. A moment where comedy took a backseat to courage, and entertainment transformed into education. It started like any other episode. Cameras rolling, audience energized, two families ready to compete. The Johnson family from Atlanta, a multigenerational black family with grandmother Doris at the helm, her daughter Patricia, son-in-law Marcus, and two teenage grandchildren. Across from them, the Miller family from Ohio, a white family with parents Dave and Susan, their college-aged son Tyler, and Dave's brother Jim. Steve walked out to applause, flashed his signature grin, did his usual warm-up with the crowd. Everything felt normal. The first few rounds went smoothly. Laughter filled the studio. Steve made his classic shocked faces at ridiculous answers. The scoreboard lit up. It was textbook Family Feud. Then came round 4. The category appeared on the board. Name something people do to show respect in different cultures. A thoughtful question, designed to celebrate diversity. Steve read it aloud, smiled at both families, and hit the buzzer to start the face-off. Tyler from the Miller family buzzed in first. He was young, mid-20s, wearing a college hoodie. He stepped up to the microphone with confidence, maybe too much confidence. And then he said it. "Well, Steve, I'd say, bow down like those Chinese people do. You know, real low. Like they're submissive or whatever." The audience didn't laugh. A few uncomfortable chuckles maybe, but mostly silence. Steve's smile froze. His eyes narrowed slightly. He glanced at the Johnson family. Grandmother Doris's face had gone still. Patricia looked down. Marcus shifted his weight. But Steve Harvey wasn't going to let this moment pass. And what he did next shocked everyone in that studio. Tyler seemed oblivious. He shrugged, looked at his family, grinned like he'd just given a winning answer. His father Dave gave him a thumbs up. The production team in the booth held their breath. Should they cut? Should they keep rolling? Steve made the decision for them. He didn't move toward the answer board. He didn't hit the buzzer. He just stood there, microphone at his side, looking at Tyler with an expression that was hard to read. Not anger exactly. Something deeper. Something sadder. "Hold on," Steve said quietly. His voice had changed. No performance. No entertainer. Just a man. "Hold on just a second." The studio went dead silent. Steve turned to the audience. "We're gonna stop right here. Just for a minute." He looked at the cameras. "Keep rolling. This is important." Tyler's smile faded. He suddenly looked very young, very unsure. Steve walked away from his podium. He walked to the center of the stage, between both families. He looked at Tyler, then at the Johnson family, then back at Tyler. "Tyler," Steve said, his voice gentle but firm. "I need you to hear something. And I need everyone here to hear it too." The audience was frozen. No one moved. No one coughed. It felt like the entire studio was holding its breath. "What you just said," Steve continued. "Maybe you thought it was funny. Maybe you didn't even think about it. But words matter. The way we talk about other people's cultures, their traditions, their ways of showing respect, it matters." Tyler's face went red. He looked down. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Steve took a step closer, not threatening, just present. "I've been doing this show for years. I've heard all kinds of answers. Some funny, some wild, some that make me do this face." He did his classic shocked expression, and a few people laughed nervously. "But this one we gotta talk about." He turned to the Johnson family. "Doris, Patricia, Marcus, y'all have been nothing but gracious tonight. You came here to have fun, to play a game, to maybe win some money. You didn't come here to be reminded that the world still sees you a certain way. And I'm sorry that happened on my stage. Grandmother Doris shook her head. Steve, it's okay. No, ma'am, it's not okay. Steve's voice was firm but kind. With respect, it's not okay. Because if we say it's okay, then we teach this young man that it's okay. And it's not. He turned back to Tyler. The young man looked like he wanted to disappear. Tyler, I don't think you're a bad person. I really don't. But I think you've been living in a bubble. And that bubble tells you that some cultures are other. That they're different in a way that makes them less than. That bowing is submissive instead of deeply respectful. That Chinese traditions are something to mock instead of something to honor. The silence was absolute. But here's what I want you to understand, Steve said, his voice softening. Every culture has ways of showing respect. In your culture, maybe it's a firm handshake, looking someone in the eye. In other cultures, it's a bow. In some, it's removing your shoes before entering a home. In others, it's the way you address your elders. None of those is better or worse. They're just different. And different is beautiful. Tyler nodded slowly. His eyes were wet. Behind the scenes, producers were making a decision that would change the network's policy forever. But what Steve Harvey did next made it all worthwhile. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. He walked over to Tyler and handed it to him. This is my personal number, Steve said quietly, but the microphones picked it up. I want you to call me. Not today, not tomorrow, but when you've thought about this. When you've really sat with it. I want to talk to you. Because I believe you can learn from this. I believe you can grow. Tyler took the card with a shaking hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. I really am. I didn't think. I know you didn't, Steve said. That's the problem. We go through life not thinking about how our words land on other people. But now you're thinking. And that's the first step. Steve turned to the Johnson family. He walked over to them, and Grandmother Doris opened her arms. Steve hugged her, and the audience finally broke their silence with applause. It wasn't the usual game show applause. It was something else. Something that sounded like relief, like catharsis, like people witnessing something real in a world that often feels scripted. When Steve pulled back, Doris was crying. Thank you, she said. Thank you for seeing us. I always see you, Steve said. Always. He turned to the Miller family. Dave looked shaken. Susan was crying. Jim had his hand on Tyler's shoulder. Dave, Susan, Steve said. I don't blame y'all. You raised a good kid. He made a mistake. We all make mistakes. But what matters is what we do after. How we grow. How we teach our children to do better. Dave nodded, his voice thick. We will. I promise we will. Steve took a long breath. He looked at the audience, at the cameras, at both families. Family Feud is about families, he said. But it's also about the human family. All of us. Black, white, Asian, Latino, Indigenous, all of us. And if we can't treat each other with respect, if we can't honor each other's cultures, then what are we doing? Why are we here? The audience erupted. Not just applause, but a standing ovation. People were crying. Both families were crying. Steve stood there, microphone at his side, just a man who had chosen to stop a show and start a conversation. But this moment didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. What happened next became legendary. After the taping, Steve didn't rush to his dressing room. He stayed. He sat with both families. He talked to Tyler for almost an hour. He listened to the Johnson family's stories about growing up black in America, about the microaggressions they faced, about the times they'd been made to feel other in their own country. Tyler listened. Really listened. And something changed in him. You could see it in his eyes. Before they left, Steve gave Tyler something else, a book. The Autobiography of Malcolm X. He inscribed it. To Tyler. Read this. Learn. Grow. Then teach others. Steve! Tyler held that book like it was made of gold. The episode aired 3 weeks later. The network debated cutting the moment. But Steve fought for it. If we cut this, we're saying it didn't matter. We're saying the conversation isn't worth having. And that's exactly the problem. They aired it. Unedited. All 7 minutes. The response was explosive. Social media erupted. Some praised Steve for his courage. Others criticized him for making it political. But the conversation had started. And that was the point. Tyler kept his promise. He called Steve. They talked for 2 hours. Steve mentored him, introduced him to people who could teach him about different cultures, different perspectives. Tyler became an advocate for cultural sensitivity training in his college. He wrote an op-ed about his experience, about learning to think before speaking, about the power of humility. The Johnson family stayed in touch with Steve. Grandmother Doris sent him a letter that he keeps in his office to this day. It reads, "Thank you for reminding us that there are still people who will stand up when it's easier to stay silent. You gave us our dignity back that day. We won't forget it." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Steve Harvey changed that day too. He started using his platform differently. He brought cultural educators onto his show. He partnered with organizations that fight racism and promote understanding. He made it clear that his stage would always be a place where respect mattered more than ratings. The card he gave Tyler? It became a symbol. Steve started carrying a stack of them. Anytime someone on his show, in his life, in his orbit said or did something that needed addressing, he'd hand them a card. Not as a punishment, but as an invitation. An invitation to grow, to learn, to do better. And people did. 3 months after the episode aired, Tyler invited Steve to speak at his university. Over 2,000 students packed the auditorium. Tyler introduced him, standing on that stage with a courage he didn't have before. "I made a mistake," he told the crowd. "A public, embarrassing mistake. But Steve Harvey didn't destroy me. He taught me. And now I'm here to teach you what I learned." The applause was thunderous. Steve stood backstage, watching this young man he'd confronted on national television now using his story to educate others. That's when Steve knew the moment had been worth it. Not because Tyler had changed, though that mattered, but because Tyler's change was creating ripples. His fraternity implemented mandatory cultural sensitivity training. His campus started difficult conversations about casual racism. One moment of courage had sparked a movement. Back at Family Feud, the producers noticed something else. Contestants became more thoughtful. Families had conversations before coming on the show about respecting everyone. The entire culture of the production shifted. Steve's 7-minute stand had created a new standard. That 7-minute moment became one of the most watched clips in Family Feud history. It's shown in diversity training seminars. It's discussed in college classrooms. It's referenced in conversations about allyship, about using privilege for good, about the responsibility that comes with a platform. Steve Harvey didn't just stop a show that day. He started a movement. A movement that says entertainment can educate. That comedy can coexist with courage. That the real victory isn't winning a game, it's winning each other's respect. The studio audience that day came for laughs. They left with something heavier, something more meaningful. They left with the understanding that sometimes, the most important thing you can do is stop. Stop and listen. Stop and speak up. Stop and remind people that we're all human, and we all deserve to be treated with dignity. Steve Harvey knows that his legacy won't just be the jokes he told, or the shows he hosted. It'll be moments like this. Moments when he chose humanity over entertainment. When he chose to teach instead of laugh it off. When he looked at a young man who'd made a mistake and said, "You can do better. We all can." And in that moment, in that silent studio, with 2 families watching and millions more who would eventually see it, Steve Harvey proved something powerful. That sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop the show. Because some lessons are more important, than any game. The Johnson family won that day. Not just the game. They won validation. They won the knowledge that someone with power chose to see them. Tyler lost the game. But he gained something more valuable, the chance to become better. That's what Steve Harvey gave them. Not a prize. A lesson. Years later, people still talk about the day Steve stopped the show and started a conversation America needed. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop everything and speak the truth. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Because these moments of courage change the world. One conversation at a time.